It wasn't what she said that broke something in me, it was the way my son looked at his shoes when she said it. That's the part I keep coming back to. That's the part that still wakes me up at 2 in the morning when the house is quiet and the only sound is the refrigerator humming in the kitchen. Not the words, the shoes. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My name doesn't matter for this story. What matters is that I'm 63 years old, I raised my son alone from the time he was 4, and I did it without a safety net. No family nearby, no ex-husband sending checks on time. Just me, a nursing job that had me on my feet 12 hours a shift, and a little boy who used to fall asleep in his church clothes because we'd go straight from Sunday service to the grocery store, and he couldn't always make it home awake. His name is Nathan. Nathan is 31 now. He has his father's height and my stubbornness, which is either a blessing or a problem depending on the week. He works in civil engineering. He coaches youth baseball on weekends. He calls me every Sunday without fail. Even when he's traveling, even when the call is only 4 minutes long and mostly just him saying, "I'm fine, Mom. How are you, Mom? Okay, I gotta go. Love you." 4 minutes. Every Sunday. For 11 years, since he moved out. I used to joke that I raised him right. Then I stopped joking about it because it stopped feeling like something to be casual about. He met Lily at a work conference in Denver. She's from Connecticut, grew up in one of those towns where the houses have names instead of street numbers. Her family has money in the way that people have money when they've had it long enough that they've stopped thinking about it. That's not a criticism. It's just context. Her mother's name is Vivienne. I want to be fair when I describe Vivienne. I want to, because fairness is something I believe in. But I also want to be honest, and honesty requires me to say that from the first time I met her, a dinner in Hartford, Nathan and Lily had been together about 8 months. I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Small, not because of anything she said directly. She was perfectly polite. She asked about my work, smiled when I answered, refilled my water glass without being asked. But there was something underneath all of it, a quality to her attention that felt less like interest and more like assessment. Like she was adding up a column of numbers and already knew she wasn't going to like the total. I told myself I was imagining it. I drove the 4 hours home from that dinner telling myself the whole way that I was being uncharitable to a woman I'd just met. Nathan and Lily got engaged the following spring. The engagement party was at Vivienne's house in Westport. It was the kind of house that has a room specifically for coats. I drove up alone, parked between a Volvo and a Range Rover, and sat in my car for about 3 minutes before I went inside. I'm not proud of that. But I needed a moment. The party was fine. Better than fine on the surface. There were people there I didn't know. A caterer, a bar setup in the living room that probably cost more than my first car. Vivienne greeted me at the door, kissed my cheek, said she was so glad I could make it. Said it the way you say it to someone's neighbor. I smiled. I mingled. I watched Nathan across the room and felt the particular pride that parents of grown children know, that quiet, swelling thing that doesn't need anyone else to see it. Then Vivienne gave a toast. It was gracious, mostly. She talked about Lily's childhood, her accomplishments, how proud she was. She talked about Nathan warmly, said he was clearly a wonderful man, that Lily had chosen well. Then she said something that I've turned over in my mind probably 1,000 times since. She said, "And we're so happy to be welcoming Nathan into our family. We really do think of him as one of our own now." The room applauded. I applauded too. But I noticed she didn't look at me when she said it. Didn't acknowledge me at all in the toast. I was sitting 12 feet away. I was the only parent Nathan had in that room, in this world. His father has been gone since Nathan was 19, and she talked about welcoming my son into her family without once referencing the family he already had. I told myself, let it go. First big event. Everyone's nervous. She didn't mean anything by it, so I let it go. The planning started in earnest about 10 months before the wedding. Lily and Nathan were getting married in Connecticut, her hometown, her family's church, a reception venue that had been in some local magazine. I understood that. The logistics made sense. I live in North Carolina. I didn't have the resources to host something on that scale, and I wasn't pretending otherwise. What I did have was time and willingness and 31 years of knowing my son. Vivienne had other ideas about what my role should be. The first sign was the dress shopping. Lily asked me to come, which meant everything to me. I took 2 days off work, and when you're a nurse, days off aren't simple. There's coverage to arrange and schedules to shuffle, and I drove up to Connecticut on a Thursday. We were supposed to go to a bridal boutique in New Haven on Friday morning. I got the text, Thursday night, from Lily, not Vivienne. Mom said she made an appointment at this other place. It's supposed to be really special. Hope that's okay. I said, of course. Of course it was okay. The other place was in Greenwich. It was beautiful. It was also, and I say this without bitterness, just as a fact, the kind of place where you needed an appointment weeks in advance, where the consultants had last names like double-barreled hyphenates, where the sample dresses probably cost more than I make in a month. Vivienne had clearly called ahead. The consultant greeted her by name. I sat in a chair and watched my future daughter-in-law try on dresses. I smiled and said the right things. But I was also, somewhere underneath all of it, watching the shape of something forming. Something I didn't have a name for yet. Over the following months, that shape got clearer. The florist consultation, scheduled for a Tuesday at 10 in the morning. I work Tuesdays. I mentioned this once gently to Lily, and she said she'd check with her mom about rescheduling. The appointment didn't change. The tasting at the reception venue, a Wednesday at noon. I also work Wednesdays. Same conversation, same result. The final walkthrough with the caterer. A Thursday evening. My one standing commitment on Thursdays is that I teach a CPR certification class at the hospital, a commitment I'd had for 4 years. I said I could probably find a substitute, but I'd need a couple weeks' notice. The walkthrough was scheduled with 6 days' notice. I missed all 3. Each time, Vivienne expressed what sounded like genuine regret. Such a shame. We really did want you there. And then the decision, the flowers, the menu, the seating configuration would be made without me. Nathan noticed. He started calling me after each one, voice careful in that way of his when he's trying to figure out how angry to be. I told him not to make it into a thing. I told him weddings are stressful and Vivienne was probably just disorganized. I told him I was fine. I was mostly fine. Mostly. The save the dates went out and listed the venue's address. Not our names. Not Nathan, son of, just the venue, the date, Lily and Nathan. Which is normal, I know, but when the formal invitations came, my name was listed last, formatted differently in a lighter font than Vivienne and her husband's names. Small thing. I know it's a small thing. But small things are how you tell someone what you actually think of them. About 2 months before the wedding, Nathan called me on a Sunday, our usual call, and I could hear something behind his voice that wasn't usually there. He asked how I was. I said, fine. He said, are you sure? And I said, yes. And there was a pause, and he said, Mom, I need you to know that whatever happens, I see it. I didn't ask him what he meant. I think I was afraid to. The week before the wedding, I drove up to Connecticut and checked into a Holiday Inn about 20 minutes from the venue. I'd offered to stay closer at a bed and breakfast that Lily had mentioned, but by the time I tried to book it, the rooms were full. When I mentioned this to Lily, she said, oh, Mom booked a block of rooms there for family back in March. Vivienne hadn't mentioned the room block to me. I found out 4 months after it was released. I smiled. I said the Holiday Inn was great, that I liked having my own space. The rehearsal dinner was the night before the wedding. It was at a restaurant in New Haven. Beautiful, private room. Long table with candles. I sat near the end. Vivienne sat near Nathan. Her toast at the rehearsal dinner was longer than the one at the engagement party. She talked about watching Lily become a woman, about the legacy of their family, about the values they'd instilled in her. It was beautiful. It was heartfelt. She cried a little. She did not mention me. She did not mention Neith's father, who was gone. She did not mention that Nathan had been raised alone. She did not mention anything about the woman who had worked nights and weekends and given up. I don't know how many things, so that the man now sitting at her daughter's rehearsal dinner could sit there with confidence and kindness and a goodness in him that I had spent 30 years cultivating. I ate my salmon. I thanked the server. I drove back to the Holiday Inn alone. The wedding was on a Saturday in October. The church was genuinely beautiful. Old stone, high ceilings, the kind of light that comes through old stained glass and makes everything look like it's happening inside a painting. I sat in the second row. Front row was reserved for Vivienne and her husband and Lily's grandparents. I was told this was just how the church worked, something about traditional seating. I sat in the second row and watched my son walk toward the altar, and I want to be honest, I was happy. Whatever had been building for a year, I set it down. Right there in the pew, I set it down, because my son looked like the best version of himself, and that was the only thing that mattered. The ceremony was perfect. The reception was at the venue about 15 minutes away. Grand old estate, white tent on the lawn, string lights everywhere, the works. I found my place card. I was at table 9. Not the family table, which was table 1. Not even close to it. Table 9 was near the edge of the tent, close to where the catering staff came in and out. I was seated with 2 of Lily's college friends who didn't know anyone, and a cousin from out of state who spent most of dinner on his phone. I smiled. I ate. I danced when the music started. And then came the moment. It was during the reception. About an hour in. The formal toasts were done. People were loosening up. The dance floor was starting to fill. I was standing near the edge of the tent with a glass of champagne, watching Nathan and Lily dance, when Vivienne appeared beside me. She'd had a few glasses of wine. I could tell. Not sloppy. She wasn't the type. But there was a looseness around her eyes, a smallness to the usual careful packaging of her. She looked at me the way you look at something you're about to put in a drawer. And she said, "I hope you know we don't blame you for how things turned out. Nathan is a lovely man, despite everything." I didn't understand at first. I said, "I'm sorry." And she said, "Raising a child alone, working those hours, he could have gone either way. You got lucky." I felt something go quiet in me, a specific kind of quiet that I'd learned in 30 years of nursing. The quiet you get when something is very wrong and you need to stay steady. I said, "I don't think luck had much to do with it." And she smiled, this small, managed smile, and said, "Mo," and said, well, either way." And she walked away. I stood there with my champagne and the music was playing and the string lights were very beautiful, and I thought, okay, just okay. That's all I had. I don't know how much time passed. Maybe 10 minutes. Maybe less. I was still standing there when I heard the music cut. Not fade, cut, the DJ cutting the track mid-song, and I looked up. Nathan was standing in the middle of the dance floor. He had a microphone. Not a wireless one, the actual handheld from the DJ setup. He had walked over and picked it up, which meant he'd done it deliberately, which meant whatever was coming had been considered. Lily was beside him, looking at him with an expression I couldn't read from where I was standing. The room went quiet. Nathan said, "I just need 1 minute. Bear with me." His voice was steady. It was the voice he gets when he's made a decision. He said, "Tonight is one of the best nights of my life. I want to be clear about that. I love my wife. I'm grateful to everyone here." Pause. I also want to take a moment that should have been taken earlier. There's a woman here tonight who worked 12-hour nursing shifts to make sure I had everything I needed. She drove 4 hours to every game, every graduation, every moment that mattered. She sat in the second row today because that's where she was put, and she didn't say a word because that's who she is. I could feel my heart. Her name is my mother, and I want everyone in this room to know that there is no version of tonight, no version of me that exists without her. He looked at me then. From across the tent, across the tables and the string lights and the people I didn't know, he looked right at me. "I love you, Mom. You are the reason I know how to love anyone." The room was very still, and then someone started clapping. And then everyone was clapping. And Lily, I watched Lily, and she was crying and nodding like she'd known this was coming and had decided it was right. I was crying too. I want to be honest about that. I'm 63 years old and I was standing near a catering exit crying into my champagne like a woman half my age, and I am not ashamed of it. Nathan handed the microphone back to the DJ. The music started again. He walked over to me. He didn't say anything. He just hugged me the way he used to hug me when he was small and something had scared him, arms all the way around, head down. I held on. When he pulled back, I looked at his face and I said, "You didn't have to do that." He said, "Yeah, I did." Vivienne left about 40 minutes later. Her husband followed. I don't know what was said between them in the car. I don't know what was said later that night or the days after. I wasn't there for any of it, and I didn't need to be. What I know is what Nathan told me 3 weeks later on our Sunday call. He and Lily had sat down with Vivienne and her husband the week after the honeymoon. Lily had been the one to call the meeting, which is something I keep coming back to. Lily, not Nathan, her daughter. Lily had told her mother calmly and directly that the way I had been treated over the previous year was not acceptable, that it had been noticed, and that if things didn't change, their access to our lives, and eventually to any grandchildren, would change accordingly. Nathan said Vivienne had cried, had said she hadn't meant anything by it, had said the scheduling conflicts were genuine, that the seating was the venue's policy, that the comment at the reception was the wine talking. Lily had listened to all of it, and then Lily had said, "Mom, whether you meant to or not, you tried to make Nathan's mother invisible at her own son's wedding. And he saw it. I saw it. And it can't happen again." That was the line Nathan quoted to me, word for word. He said Lily had said it quietly, without drama, the way you say something when you've decided it's final. I didn't have words for a moment. I asked Nathan if things were okay between him and Lily, and he said, better than okay, that what had come out of all of it was an honesty between them that they might not have found another way. I asked about Vivienne. He said she'd been different since. Quieter, more careful. He said she'd asked about me on 2 separate occasions, genuinely asked, not the performance of asking. I don't know if we'll ever be close. I'm not sure I need that. What I need, what I'd always needed, was just to not be erased, to be acknowledged, to have my son know that I saw what happened and was okay. I'm okay. Nathan called last Sunday. The call was 11 minutes, which is long for us. He told me Lily is pregnant, 8 weeks. They wanted me to be the first to know. I sat down on my kitchen floor, not dramatically, just sat the way you do when your legs decide before you do. And I cried for the second time in 1 year over my son, except this time there was nothing in it but fullness. He said, "Mom, you still there?" I said, "I'm here. I'm right here." And that was all either of us needed to say. I've been thinking about something ever since that Sunday call when Nathan told me Lily was pregnant. I've been thinking about how long it took for any of this to make sense. Not just the wedding, not just Vivienne, but all of it. The years before. The years of just getting through. Here's what I know now that I didn't know how to say then. The way you live eventually becomes visible. You can't hide it forever. Not the good, and not the bad. Vivienne spent a year carefully constructing something, the seating, the schedules, the small social signals that said you are not quite one of us, and she did it so politely, so gracefully, that I started to wonder if I was the problem. That's the insidious part. When someone is skilled at diminishing you, your first instinct is to doubt your own eyes. But I had raised a son who trusted his eyes. That's the thing nobody tells you when you're in the thick of raising a child alone. You don't see the results in real time. You see the grocery trips, the permission slips, the nights you fall asleep in your work clothes because there was nobody else to stay up. You see the gaps, all the things you couldn't give, the vacations you couldn't afford, the years he grew up without a father around. You see those gaps constantly. What you can't see yet is what's filling in around them. The character that forms precisely because things weren't easy. The loyalty that develops in a child who watched one person show up, over and over, without making it anyone's problem. Nathan didn't pick up that microphone because I taught him a speech. He did it because he had been watching. He'd been watching for months, the scheduling, the seating chart, the toast that didn't include me. He took it in quietly, the way he's always processed things. And then he decided what it meant and what he was going to do about it. That's not luck. That's not temperament. That's a person who learned, somewhere along the way, that integrity isn't something you perform when it's convenient. It's what you do when it costs you something. Standing up at his own wedding reception, in front of his new in-laws, in front of people he'd have to see for the rest of his life, that cost him something. He did it anyway. And Lily. I want to say something about Lily because she is part of this story in a way I didn't fully appreciate until Nathan told me what happened in that room with her mother. She looked Vivian in the eye and said, "You tried to make Nathan's mother invisible at her own son's wedding." That sentence came from her, not from anger, from clarity, from a young woman who had made a decision about what kind of family she was building and was willing to protect it even when the other person was her own mother. I think about what it takes to do that, to love your parent and still hold them accountable. That's not easy at any age. That takes a kind of emotional courage that doesn't come from nowhere either. What I've come to understand is that the choices we make and how we treat people don't stay contained. They ripple. Vivian's choices rippled. They changed what her daughter was willing to tolerate, what her son-in-law would carry forward, what kind of access she'd have to the next generation. Not because anyone decided to punish her, simply because actions have weight, and weight has consequences. And my choices rippled too. Every shift I worked, every time I showed up, every time I held my tongue when it would have been easier not to. I wasn't building toward a moment at a wedding reception. I was just trying to get through the week. But it added up to something. It added up to a son who knew what he owed and wasn't ashamed to say it out loud. I don't need Vivian to understand any of this. I don't need an apology or a reconciliation or anything dramatic. What I needed was already given to me, by Nathan, in front of everyone, on a Saturday in October, under string lights with a borrowed microphone. The rest is just living.